Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Heroes Biographies. Today, we're going to get to know more about Joseph, and he is a very beloved and respected and admired young man that we find in the Bible. And today, we will learn more about him and what makes him such a beloved hero. This is Heroes 2 Hero Biography. Joining me today to learn more about Joseph, we have Jonathan Walter. Hello, Jonathan. How are you?
Hi, Kenia. Good to see you. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well also. Just excited to be able to dive into yet another character in the Bible, and one that I think that all of us also know very well. So far, we've been getting to know many Bible characters that as soon as we hear their names, we can associate with something, whether it be Moses, whether it be Queen Esther. There's always something that we can quickly bring to mind about these Bible characters. And I think the same goes for Joseph. I think the moment that we hear the name Joseph, we think, 12 brothers. We think a very big family. We think of Jacob. We think of Egypt. We think of the way they treated him, and we think how difficult his life was. He went to prison, it was such a crazy scene as well, because it was totally unjust. And so we think about all these things, but then we also know about his rise, right? Which I think makes his story that much more interesting. It's almost like this rags to riches, this rise from the ground up kind of story. And it makes it so inspiring to many. But today we want to learn a little bit more about Joseph. We want to get to know him a little better. We want to see him as a real person. And so for that, I have a few questions that I need your help for.
Sure.
All right. So let's get started with the first question. And the first question I have here is why do we like their story so much? Why is it that when we hear this story, we enjoy it? What makes it so great?
That's a really good question. The story of Joseph really has all the right ingredients for, an epic movie when you think about it. I'm actually surprised that there are not more movies done about his life. But basically, we see different elements. We see crisis, we see struggle. You mentioned the rise of Joseph and just incredible plot twists too. This story is just so exciting, and people love reading it and people love experiencing it. But then also, I think you have a lot of relatable items like, teenage struggles, toxic family situations. You have the parents having favorites and then siblings fighting. I think we can all relate to that if you have a sibling. But then also we see, some of the temptations and problems that we even face today, jealousy, pride, sexual temptations, but then also really beautiful elements of grace and redemption. How do you forgive somebody? How do you heal a broken family? So just a lot of incredible ingredients to make a powerful story that Joseph's story brings forth.
You're definitely right. I think that I had never considered the fact that Joseph has the makings of a movie. Joseph has the makings of a series. And I know that I have seen some, especially in Spanish, some Spanish series on his life, and they are pretty dramatic. Because like you mentioned, there are a lot of plot twists. There are a lot of things that we don't see coming. And then all of a sudden this
a lot
just
of drama.
Happens. So it's very enjoyable drama, I guess, from a viewer's perspective, but definitely not from someone actually living the situation, right? He went through a lot of difficult things, and I had never thought about just how toxic the family relationship was actually like. So amidst all of this, amidst all of the drama, the plot twists, the toxicity, all of this difficulty, why is it that we consider him a hero? Because we do. I think that there are some Bible characters that we might wonder, is this Bible character a hero? Should we consider them a hero? But I feel like in Joseph's case, it's pretty agreed upon that he was a hero. Why do we consider him a hero?
What's so interesting about Joseph is that he fulfills kind of the criteria of what Hollywood would call a hero today, but he also gives us the criteria of a biblical hero. When it comes to the Hollywood version of a hero, he really, he has superpowers. What are the superpowers? God gave him the gift of having dreams and interpreting dreams that God gives. So that's a really cool kind of special power he has that, given from God. But on the other hand, really, he is a biblical hero because he's somebody who learned through humility, through surrender to God, that God will elevate you and empower your life to live a life of grace, service, intelligence, and overcoming some of the toxicity that we talked about, some of the challenging circumstances that Joseph was facing. So in that sense, he is a real hero because he trusted in God to help him through some of these struggles. But
Mhm.
in a way, a biblical hero, I would say, is also somebody who who deals with personal issues, who faces them, who just doesn't ignore his own struggles. Because Joseph was a great guy, but he also had probably some pride problems early on. His dad's favorite. He was his dad's favorite. His dad gave him the special clothing. He was kind of a snitch. He told his dad about his brothers, what they were doing. So there were some issues there, but he faced those issues clearly, as you can see in his character transformation over the years. So he fulfills all these categories, of a biblical hero, and he recognized that despite the bad situation that he found himself in, and despite the challenges that he could not control, he was going to live a life of faithful service to God, no matter what was going to happen to him. And I think that's really what makes a true hero: being willing to not your life and your character being dictated by your circumstances, but rising
Mhm.
above that by trusting in God and being faithful where we are, where in that situation that he is, and we can see in his story that God honors that and blessed him and lifted him up.
I really like that you said he rose above it and he wasn't controlled by the situations that were thrown his way. And I
Hmm.
had never considered the fact that the dreams that he had and the interpretations of the dreams were in fact a
Hmm.
sort of superpower given by God himself. So
Right.
that is a very interesting point that you just brought. And funny enough, you did touch on a little bit of the next question that I have here for you. And it's,
Hmm.
we talk about all of the great things about Joseph, and there are so many great things that we can consider in his character and the way he dealt with things, who he was, everything he stood for. But you did touch upon his struggles. So what are some of those things he struggled with? You mentioned
Hmm.
pride. And I think
Hmm.
that is a powerful one that a lot of us can probably relate to. So what are some of those personal struggles?
Yeah, so pride, absolutely, as mentioned before. Also,
Mhm.
in a way, the unfair treatment that he was exposed to. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
he had to first go through the experience of thinking he's going to be killed by his brothers, but then he gets sold into slavery. Just wrap your mind around that. Your siblings sell you into slavery, and then having to, deal with that as a teenager, 17 years old. That is rough. And how do you
Mhm.
reconcile the stories you heard from your dad and your grandfather about how God's going to bless your family in a special way, and now you're here a slave? You're dealing
Yeah.
with identity issues. Who am I? What does God want me to do? And having to face that, and that Joseph came out on the other end of this, remaining faithful in the circumstances of Egypt. I mean, Egypt was, we know from history that this is a very religious culture, but really it's a very satanic religion, really.
Mm.
And so in amidst all of that, and the temptations and the challenges that came with being a slave, and then of course being unfairly treated, a slave is worth nothing, and
Mm.
you just don't have to be obedient. How do you remain faithful? Joseph made that decision to stay faithful, and then his faith was tested over and over again. He did rise in the beginning. He was in Potiphar's home, but then the sexual temptation that is a huge challenge even today to many. He said, I will not sin against God. I'm not going to go that direction, and he was willing to die for it, because
Mhm.
as a slave you have no rights, and if you go against your master's wishes, you're dead. But he
Yes.
remained faithful. But those are challenges that we see even today. Maybe not all exactly the same. I don't
Mhm.
I don't think any of us are in slavery, but we all
Mhm.
are faced with slavery to sin. We're all faced with the
Yes.
challenges of our circumstances, toxic families. Maybe our work situation is bad, or our school situation, and making a decision like Joseph in those situations to remain faithful to God. That's what a true hero true biblical hero is all about.
I think it's great that you mentioned that he has all of these struggles because it just makes
Hmm.
him super relevant to us, right? And everyone who's excited about playing Heroes 2, to be able to play as a character who had
Mm.
situations that he had to overcome just like we do. Some things that, like you said, might not be exactly like what we struggle with, but in its core, there are many things that we can relate to. The issues that we have to try to stand up against, the idea of
Hmm.
being able to stand firm in places where maybe it'll be easier if we just sit down, back up, and stay quiet. So I just think that if anything, it makes us admire him even more, even with all of his struggles, the way that in the end we see how he was able to overcome it, right?
Right, right. No, it's powerful, and
Yeah.
it's I'm excited that through this game, Heroes 2, we can get a glimpse of that and learn, and maybe hopefully apply some of these lessons to our lives.
Definitely. Now, we're learning a little bit about all these struggles, but
Hmm.
obviously he overcame them, which I think helps us understand the answer to the next question, which is what was his relationship with God like? It was obviously a very, very strong relationship. If ultimately, even with everything that was going on, he was able to
Hmm.
rise above. He could not have done that on his own. He definitely had to depend on the Lord.
Yeah, it really speaks to the fact that his upbringing was God centered, and the stories he heard about God interacting with his father and his grandfather and so on. This is something that it really can help us as well to notice stories of those who have gone before us, to notice stories of the Bible, and
Mhm.
then keeping those stories in mind because Joseph did not have a Bible in Egypt. He had to remember the stories. He had to
Mhm.
remember the experiences, the prayers, the things that he was exposed to as a child, and he held on to that. I think that's a great lesson for us to be aware and know the stories of people who experience God, and knowing that the same God who took care of Jacob, the same God who took care of the people we know that follow God, will also take care of us. And then
Mhm.
familiarizing ourselves with the promises of God, that he will take care of us. Joseph remembered the promise that God gave his father and grandfather, that God's going to bless this nation, even though it didn't look like it at the time. And he
Mhm.
he held on to those promises and to the faithfulness of God, and that's what kept him, give him strength throughout the entire story, and gave him also the ability. You think about Joseph's dad, Jacob. Powerful story there too, right? He's a hero as well,
Mhm.
and he had the experience of experiencing God's forgiveness and grace. And
Mhm.
I believe Joseph was aware of that story, and so he was able to also um, ex, uh, you know um, uh, show forgiveness and grace towards his brothers, as we know at the end of his
Mhm.
story, which is a beautiful twist of the story. He did not come with fury and anger and trying to
Mhm.
retaliate what his brothers had done to him. No, he said, God has allowed this, and he's turning this curse that you meant for me into a blessing for our
Mhm.
people. So it's just so much we can learn, but we can trust that God will be faithful to his promise, even if it doesn't always look like it.
I think that's something that all of us can hold on to right now, even with everything that
Mm,
might be going on in our personal lives or what's going on in the world, to be able to just
right.
hold on to those promises to the God that we know has been faithful and will continue to be faithful. What a powerful statement is his entire life. I think Joseph's
Amen.
entire life is just a statement to that faith and that
Yeah.
faithfulness. Now we're on our last question. It went by so quickly, and we're learning so much about a character that I think that we always do talk about and we always do praise. But I think that getting to know about those inner workings, maybe of what was happening, helps us appreciate him even more. And so,
Hmm.
getting to know more about his life story, understanding his struggles, understanding his relationship,
Hmm.
how can we apply all of this, all of his story now to our lives?
That's really always the most important part of a story. How does it
Yeah.
apply to my own life? And I think we haven't mentioned already quite a bit, but making a conscious decision that no matter where I am, my work, my family, my ministry, whatever I do in my life, wherever I am, whatever my circumstances, we have the power to choose. The story of Joseph really is the story of the power of choice. You can choose to be determined by your circumstances, or you can choose to be determined by God's will. And as Joseph trusted in God, he said, I will be faithful no matter what. We can choose to trust God and to be faithful no matter what. And learning from God in the journey, facing struggles, in the journey of, giving and receiving forgiveness and grace, it's a decision we can make every day anew. This is really one of the main things for me personally that I learned from this story. I want to be consciously making a decision for God every day, because the reality is we live in a true great controversy between good and evil, and every day we are faced with a choice. Are we going to be on the side of God or not? And even if the temptations or the struggles tell us all the time, just let go, just give in, just let the circumstances kind of guide you. No, God is saying, trust me, and I'm going to elevate you. I'm going to take you to that, Pharaoh level and above, as the son and daughter of God. So every one of us can be a true hero if we choose to trust in the ultimate hero, which is, Jesus, our friend and savior.
Amen. And I think that all of us want to be a hero here on earth, representing the ultimate hero, Jesus Christ. And so I'm excited and I'm happy that we have examples to follow in the Bible with Joseph, someone who did have his struggles, someone who had so many ups and downs, but ultimately remained faithful to God and was able to see that God also remained faithful to him. So,
Amen.
Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all of the insight, for making him a real life person for us, Joseph, and not just another character in a book. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Kenia.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on another Heroes 2 biography. We are learning so much. So make sure that you keep coming back. You keep tuning in to learn more about the lives of the characters that you will find on Heroes 2. Until next time.